Hey, it's Jazz at Red Panda Reads, and today I'm going to talk to you about all the non-fiction I've read over the last 3 years. Do not panic, that is only 8 books, one of which I finished 8 years ago, and the other 7 that I've read in the last year, 2 of which were in the last week. And I think I finally found what type of non-fiction I enjoy and I find really readable, because some of these books I'm going to talk about I haven't finished, and one of them I'm not sure I will, but I will still wanted to talk to you about that book. So let us begin. So the first book I want to talk about I finished a couple of days ago. I read it in 2 days, which is unheard of for me in terms of reading non-fiction because it normally takes me so long. And that book was Lowborn by Kerry Hudson. This book was absolutely phenomenal. Kerry talks about her experience growing up in poverty in the UK and the effects it had on her life. And it's an absolutely heartbreaking, beautifully crafted book. We follow Kerry in 2019 as she goes back to the places where she lived growing up to go and see if they've changed, seek out old memories, and therefore you go through that emotional experience with her of reliving sometimes very difficult, traumatic events. I think for anyone who lives in the UK in particular, this is a really eye-opening read and I would really recommend it. It makes you question a lot of things, and there are some facts and figures in this book regarding poverty which are just unbelievable and quite worrying at times, but the way that Kerry includes them into the book is very seamless, and although when you read them you just stop and think, oh my god, it's not, she doesn't just throw facts at you, it is a lot more of an emotional journey. So this book was amazing. I just want to give Kerry a massive hug, and I think the reason I found it so readable was because it was told like a story, and that is one thing I enjoy with my non-fiction. But 5-star. I don't normally even rate my non-fictions. This was just phenomenal and is going to stay with me for a long time, so I would really recommend. Very, very eye-opening. The next 2 books I'm going to talk to as a pair, and that is This Is Going to Hurt and Twas the Nightshift Before Christmas by Adam Kay. First off, let's just talk about these books. These books are, again, amazing. They talk about life as a junior doctor in the UK. They are heartbreaking at times. They are laugh out loud funny. There are so many jokes in this book by Adam Kay that I just adore, and he is such a charismatic character. The way he writes is so readable, and I think that means this book is really accessible to everyone, even if you don't have a medical background or even if you're not a big fan of non-fiction, because he just makes you laugh. The great thing also about this book is I think it gives you a real insight of what life is like still in the UK working as a junior doctor. It talks about the amazing relationships you form with your patients, with your colleagues. It talks about the challenges you have while you're working, the people you meet, the things you see, the tears you're shed. And it is extremely eye-opening, and I think one of the best kind of insights into the day-to-days of your doctors and how they kind of manage to cope and come back the next day with a smile on their face. This book I read 3 years ago. This one I read a couple of months ago around Christmas, and it was good but not as good as this. These books are really challenging for me to read and to talk about. Reason being, I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but I recently made a decision to leave my career as a doctor. It was a long time coming. It's something I spent years and years considering, and I finally made the decision. And although I know I made the decision that was right for me, there is still those feelings of regret, that feeling of failure, all those negative thoughts. And I'm getting better. I'm getting over it. I was able to read this book, and there were certain bits of it, such as when talking about not being able to find the right size scrubs, that just made me laugh and was like, made me think, yeah, I remember that. There was one day when I came to work when we all had to wear scrubs because of the beginning of COVID, and literally there were no right sizes for me. So there I was in like the biggest size scrubs, having to hoist my trousers up to basically top of my chest, tie them up there, and then wear another top underneath my scrubs, otherwise it was wholly indecent. But there was so much about this book that I could relate to, and that made it difficult because of those feelings I've got. Read these books to get a real insight of what it's like to be a junior doctor in the UK, and everyone working for the NHS, from healthcare assistants to doctors to occupational therapists to speech and language therapists to the person on reception. Everybody, thank you for what you have done. Like, the world is crazy at the moment and you guys are phenomenal. The next book I want to talk about is Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. This book was also absolutely fantastic, very readable, very accessible to a wide range of audiences, and when I finished it, it felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It talks about Matt's experiences with depression and anxiety from the point at which he was considering ending his own life, through the time that he spent at home unable to barely go to the shops without having a severe panic attack, to now where he is an international bestseller with a family but still at times struggles with anxiety and depression. And the things I love about this book is he challenges the stigma around mental illness. He also talks about how there is this massive divide at the moment between physical and mental illness, and it is a massive problem in society that we view them so differently. He really highlights how we have all this horrible stigma towards mental health conditions, and it's not taken as seriously a lot of the time as what is considered to be more physical conditions. He also talks about how it's okay to not always be okay, and that although there will be bad days, there will be better days, and he makes you feel like there's hope when you're feeling really, really, really shit. The next book I want to talk about was the first non-fiction book I read in a long time, and that was The Inconvenient Indian, a curious account of native people in North America by Thomas King. This book was really, really educational for me. It talks about the native people of North America and their history and the struggles they've had to deal with, and the discrimination, the violence, the stealing of land, and it is incredible, heartbreaking account of what's gone on. It was just shocking, and it taught me a lot more about a part of history that I didn't know much about. And the author is very conversational in how he writes. There are parts of it which he uses quite dark humour as well, because it's almost as if you didn't laugh, you would be crying and not being able to get through the book. One thing I found a little bit more difficult with this book is he does a lot of lists, and I think the effectiveness of this is it just shows how much stuff happened. If you list a load of events and it just keeps on going, it's just like, oh damn, that is a lot of stuff. But sometimes I was a bit overwhelmed with dates and events, but if you take a step back from that and just look at it in terms of this is the huge amount of things that happened, it made it easier to read. But altogether, really heartbreaking, amazing, educational book for me, and I would really recommend it. The next two books I read, I haven't actually finished, and the first of those is The Museum of Whales You Will Never See, Travels Among the Collectors of Iceland by A. Kendra Greene. I saw this book, and not only is it beautiful, but I absolutely adored Iceland when I was lucky enough to go and visit there. The scenery was incredible. There are over 265 museums on Iceland, and most of them stem from private collections that have grown over the years to form museums. And this book takes you around loads of the different museums and looks into the history of the museums and tells you about the people of Iceland. And those are the bits that I have loved about this book. There is a penis museum, which is hilarious. There is a museum of all different types of rocks, and just super, super interesting. However, I wish there had been more focus on the people of Iceland and their culture and the museums, rather than this continuous reflection on the museums, because it felt very much like the author was taking the accounts of these people and the museums and then extrapolating so many meanings from it. So you know, when you were younger and you were in English literature and you'd get a book and you'd have to analyse it in a lot of detail, and there may be one sentence that says she picked the daffodil and it crumpled in her hand, and you would have to basically analyse it in depth and be like, why did they choose a daffodil? What was the use of crumpled? Why was that said in that way? And kind of get all these meanings from it. This is what it felt like this book was doing quite a lot, and that is why I'm about 100 pages in. I've got just less than half of it left, and I just don't feel like picking it up, which is a real shame. The next book I also haven't finished, but I will be finishing at some point, and that is Mother Country, Real Stories of the Windrush Children by Charlie Brinkhurst-Cuff. So this author has basically gone around and spoken to people who are children of the Windrush generation to collect their stories, and it's so interesting. Some of the stories are so hopeful, some of them you're just sickened by the systemic racism within our country, but it was really, really eye-opening. The reason I haven't finished it is I've recently realised that the thing I like about non-fiction is when it has a kind of story-like structure. So it reads like a story, whereas this is just lots of little short stories rather than a continuing one. So I find myself dipping in and out, and I always find the hardest bit of a book is the beginning. So every time you start a new story, I struggle a little bit getting into it, but then by the middle and the end, I'm really enjoying it. So it's just a book that I will get through relatively slowly, but I think it is still worth a read. The last book I'm going to talk about is Thick and Other Essays by Tracy, McMillian, Gotham. I spoke about this book recently, but it is a collection of essays that discuss things such as Black womanhood, politics, feminism, body image, the healthcare system, and it's just a very powerful collection of essays. And the thing I loved about this book is Tracy McMillan Cottom has such a way with writing. It is so beautiful and almost lyrical at times, and she also comes across as this really strong, confident voice of reason in a sometimes mad world, and I really enjoyed that, and very eye-opening. I forgot to say she is a sociology professor in America, and I think her writing is really wonderful. So those are all the non-fiction books I have read over the last 3 years, and basically all the ones I can remember ever reading in my life, other than so many medical textbooks. I realised looking at this pile that the books I enjoyed the most were those that told a story that followed a time period, and where you really get to know the narrator and form quite a bond with them. I think my parting message is going to be Lowborn was incredible, read it. But I'm looking forward to reading more non-fiction. I have a few more on my bookshelf at the moment, and I think I also need to remember it's okay to leave a book for a bit or even not finish a book. And I'll just give it to a new good home. Have a lovely week, guys. I will see you next Tuesday, and take care. Bye-bye.